10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 198. Hey everybody, welcome back into another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. My name is Nick Manella, creator and host of this show, and we've been with you for almost 200 episodes. We are closing in quickly on that number, and very, very excited about it, and very, very excited that you guys keep joining us each and every week here on the podcast. Really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Seeing all of you coming back episode after episode just makes me very excited to put these things out and keep coming up with brand new ideas for you. Keep the show going. So just a reminder, if you want to grab the PDF to this episode and all other 197 episodes that we've ever done, you can head over to our Patreon page, and that is the page that allows you to support this podcast directly in the form of a very small monthly donation. It's only $3 a month to keep this show going, and we've got over 250 people over there supporting the show, and hopefully you'll consider it if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you can go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up, and you get instant access to all of that material over there. And we're very excited to keep putting that stuff out. We have had a huge influx of new patrons this week, and I've got to thank them. Thank you to Peter, Chris, Josh, Carla, D.A., David, Matthew, and Deborah. Thank you guys so much for signing up. It's really awesome to see all those names pop up as new patrons, and thank you for your support. We definitely could not do this without you. So again, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon links, head over and get your rewards today. Okay, so let's get into this week's episode. This is part 4. This has been a long series, but I think it's totally worth it to get you guys playing these melodic fragments and really change your playing a little bit, where you're concentrating on the chord tones, but you're not neglecting all of those in-between notes that are going to give us that beautiful melodic sound that we want as improvisers. So one more episode on this, and then next week I will be doing an etude, our monthly etude for all of you, using all of these fragments over a jazz standard. But today we're going to go over one more thing. So last week we talked about 5-note melodic fragments, right? So we are connecting 2 chord tones instead of 1. Actually, 3 chord tones. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So if we were starting on the 3rd, we would do a 5-note melodic fragment that went all the way up through the 5th and all the way to the 7th. And then we also did 5th all the way to the first extension, which was the 9th. And it was sort of expanding our possibilities with these chord tone connecting lines. So if you haven't checked out that episode, go back, check out episode 197, and that's going to be essential knowledge for what we're going to talk about this week. So now that we have those melodic fragments down, we've been practicing them over the blues, we've been sort of discovering the different sounds that we get using those fragments. Now what we want to do is we need to realize that organizing them in a stepwise fashion is not the only way to use these sets of notes. And in fact, that can become a little bit repetitive for us once we start to gain real fluency with these melodic fragments. We want to start to introduce some jumps into the mix as well. So by taking these 5-note fragments and incorporating not only, in order from, let's say, 5 to 9, what if we were to jump around amongst those notes and start creating lines that have a little bit more interesting interval structure than just a major or a minor second? I think that that's really important, to look at a grouping of notes in as many different ways as possible. Another word for this is melodic permutations. So taking a group of notes and figuring out all the different permutations that we can use to create different sounds from the same grouping. the same grouping of tones. Now, that being said, there are still some rules that do apply here. And one of those rules is that we still want to start and end our 5-note fragment with one of those chord tones. So if we were to look at 3 to 7, right, there's 3 chord tones in there. We have the 3, the 5, and the 7 with those passing tones of 4 and 6. We still need to play a chord tone as the first note and a chord tone as the last note. Those beats are our strong harmonic beats where we want real clarity in our playing. It gives our lines a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. So that's going to be the rule. We still need to have one of those notes, beat 1 and beat 3. Could be any of those notes. All that we're trying to strive for is to use that same grouping of notes, but now we're really mixing up the order and not always going straight up or straight down. So if you look at example number 1 on your PDF this week, what I've done is I've taken the melodic fragment 3 to 7 and I've mixed it up in a variety of different permutations, bunch of different ways. Some of them contain large jumps, some of them contain small jumps, but if you look at it, you do have a chord tone, either a 3, 5, or 7 on every beat 1 and 3. And that's really going to give our ears that kind of home base so that no matter what we do between beats 1 and 3, it's going to be clear that we're starting and we're ending the phrase in a way that makes a lot of sense. So let's check out what example number 1 sounds like. Keep in mind, this is always the same melodic fragment, 3 to 7, but you're going to hear a whole bunch of different sounds, and that's kind of the point of this exercise. So here's exercise number 1. All right, so you can hear what that does, right? It just provides for more interesting playing, really. I mean, that's the bottom line. If we're always playing with the interval of a second, it gets old after a while. So now we're incorporating some thirds, some fourths, maybe even some fifths. Yeah, some fifths. We're doing a lot of different stuff in this just to make this same grouping of notes have a completely different sound. That's what jazz is all about, right? Take an idea, flip it as many ways as you possibly can to get those different sounds. All right, so example number 2 is the exact same concept, but now we're using that second melodic fragment that we learned last week, which was 5 up to 9. Now remember, 9 is not technically a chord tone. It's the first extension that we're dealing with, right? But we're just going to call it a chord tone because it's something that we play so often, and that first extension above the chord is a note that we should be using pretty often. So same thing, I'm always going to use those specific 5 notes, but I'm going to be putting them in as many different orders as I can possibly think of, and I'm going to be using different intervals while still keeping either the 5, 7, or 9 happening on beat 1 and beat 3. What happens in between beats 1 and beat 3, fair game. Kind of do whatever I want. That sounds good to me in between there. It's really a can of worms once you open it. You realize how many different permutations there are, how many different possibilities there are. So here is example number 2 on your example sheet for this week. All right, there you have it. There's example number 2. You could hear the different sound that we get from that second melodic fragment, that 5 to 9, which we've been trying to sort of illustrate to you every time we do those different melodic fragments. And now you can really see the power of these, the different things that they can do the different orders that you can put them in, how deep just one 5-note segment can go if you decide to take it to the limit. And that's what jazz is all about, right? Taking some simple ideas and doing as much as you possibly can with them to extract all the different sounds and approaches that you can get from simple ideas. So that about does it for this week. Hopefully that made sense. If you've got any questions about this episode, please leave them for me in the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. We've already had some people demonstrate that they've been working on these ideas, which I always love to hear. So if you're somebody that's sitting at home working on this stuff, post a video, post a question, start a discussion. We really have had a lot going on in that group lately, which I think is awesome. Also, you only have one more week to get your transcription assignment done for this month, which is our Chet Baker solo. Go back and listen to the Motivation Monday where I talk about that assignment. We've already had a ton of people post their transcriptions. They've all sounded awesome, and I love hearing that from people. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, if you want to go and grab the PDFs, you want to support the show, keep it coming at you every single week, go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, $3 a month. If you've got that $3 a month to spare, we really appreciate the support. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great weekend. Bye.